Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Public Sector Catering's Plant-Based Week webinar. We've got a great lineup for you today, starting with an interview with Dr. Rupy Aujla and going on to debate the future of plant-based eating in the public sector. I want to thank at this early stage our platinum partners for this week: Devil's Kitchen, Garden Gourmet, Green Cuisine, Nor Professional and Meatless Farm. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to do all these things. And we've been getting some great feedback across social media and directly to us with the demos we've run already. We'll tell you a little bit more about those later. So today's lineup for you is, as I say, an interview initially with Dr. Rupy Aujla, and then we have a panel that you can see in front of you of esteemed industry experts who will be debating what the future is for plant-based meals in the public sector. Just going to let people log on for a minute or two more, and we'll see where we get to, and then we'll pass over to start the interview. If you want to post questions to Rupy or the panel today, please use the chat function. Please use, sorry, the Q&A function, not the chat function. If you just want to chat with other people on the webinar today, then please use the chat function. It just makes it a lot easier for David to pick out the questions as they get posed. Okay, we'll give it about another minute and then we will start. Okay. And I think we're probably about ready to go. So David, over to you.
Right, thank you. And good morning, I'm David Fode, editor of Public Sector Catering magazine, and thank you for joining us for the latest event in our Plant-Based Week programme. Today I'm going to be talking to GP, Dr. Rupy Aujla. Excuse me, yeah. Dr. Rupy is the man behind the concept of culinary medicine and the Doctor's Kitchen books and TV series. He's going to have a lot of interesting things to say about plant-based foods and nutrition in the public sector. He's also, we've also got an overview of some new research into public sector progress on the pledge made last year to serve less and better meat. This will be from Simon Billing, Executive Director of the Eating Better Alliance, who has worked with us here at Public Sector Catering magazine on the research report. After that, Dr. Rupy and Simon will be joined by Andy Jones, Chair of the Public Sector Catering 100 Group, Alexia Robinson, Chief Executive of Love British Food, and Nick Vadis, the Culinary Director with Compass Group UK, for a discussion about the future of plant-based food in the public sector. Before all of that, a quick reminder, I know Andrew's done this already, but it doesn't hurt just to repeat it, about how the webinar works today. Other than the panelists and me, everyone will be muted. If you want to get in touch during the webinar, you can put a question to the panelists using the Q&A function. We'd ask you, if you do, to please include your name and company. And remember, you don't have to wait until we start taking questions. You can post a question anytime, right from the start, if you like. If you just want to comment, then you can get involved using the chat function, remembering to choose the option to all panelists and attendees. We won't, unfortunately, be able to monitor that for questions. So if you've got a question in the Q&A section, please. Right, Dr. Rupy Aujla is an NHS medical doctor specialised in general practice who works in emergency medicine. Since learning more about nutritional medicine and following 10 years of research, he started the Doctor's Kitchen in 2015 as a way of teaching people how they can cook their way to health and to showcase what he calls the beauty of food and the medicinal effects of eating and living well. In 2017, he was behind a collaborative organisation involving dietitians, chefs and doctors who teach healthcare professionals the foundations of clinical nutrition, as well as how to cook. Good morning, Dr. Rupy.
Morning.
Morning. Well, thank you very much for joining us here today. And we'll crack right on with the questions. I guess people would want to know, how you as a GP came to be so passionate about food as a crucial form of medicine.
Yeah, so like you said, I'm a practicing GP working in the NHS and A&E at the moment. And I guess my story starts back in 2009 when I first qualified as a junior doctor 12 years ago, and I got ill myself. So I started suffering from atrial fibrillation, which, for those of you who don't know, it's a condition where your heart beats irregularly, and in my case, very fast. Very uncommon to have it in a 24-year-old. No previous medical history. But what had happened in those short 3 months when I became a junior doctor is that my lifestyle had completely changed. So I was eating cereals for breakfast, whatever the hospital canteen gave me for lunch, wasn't sleeping properly, stressed, as you can imagine, being a newbie on the job. And I was going to have something called an ablation, which is where you burn an area around the pulmonary vein to stop the misfiring cells in the cardiac area. And it was my mum, who's not a medic, who suggested to me that I should really look at my diet and lifestyle before I entertained something as drastic as an intervention. And I thought she was talking rubbish, to be honest, but really to appease her, I started looking at diet and making a few changes. And over the course of about 2 years, my atrial fibrillation episodes went from 2 to 3 times per week to 0. And so I guess the doctor's kitchen and everything I've done thus far, including my master's in nutritional medicine and a whole bunch of other courses that we're running now, has really been trying to get to the crux of how on earth this is possible, why wasn't I taught this at medical school, and how to push the message to as many people as we can so we can help further advance the field of culinary medicine, nutritional medicine, and get people eating and living better.
Okay, yeah. This concept of culinary medicine, getting food and nutrition added to the syllabus for a medical degree, you obviously sort of saw the lack of it. What is culinary medicine and how does it work?
Yeah, so culinary medicine, we started here in the UK back in 2017, but it's not our concept and it's not new in the slightest. It's actually been around for about 2 decades now, pioneered in America of all places. So the first culinary medicine courses were in Harvard and Tulane Medical School, which is where we've had a lot of links. But essentially, it's teaching medics and healthcare professionals, I should add, so not just doctors, but also nurses and the wider sphere of medical professionals, the basics of clinical nutrition and how to cook. So we're blending the science of healthcare management and medicine and nursing with the practicality and the need to know how to cook yourselves. And it's from 2 perspectives. It's so we can elevate the conversation around food in clinical environments, but it's also from the perspective of self-care, because I'm not too sure if people recognize, but healthcare professionals are more likely to die younger, we're more likely to be overweight, we're more likely to suffer from depression, we're more likely to have cardiovascular disease. There's a whole plethora of illnesses that afflict us more than the general population. So we also want to try and teach them to take better care of themselves, because I was probably, had I not had such an early issue myself, I probably would have been along the same trajectory of illness had I not, had my heart issues when I first started.
What success have you had so far with it?
Oh, it's been great. So we started with Westminster Kingsway Culinary College. So they're a fantastic catering college in the middle of London. And we have a strategic partnership with them where we have a culinary medicine centre of excellence there with a dedicated kitchen. We're currently in Bristol Medical School as part of a 4-week specialty choice module, but we're also in UCL as part of their compulsory medical education. And that's the first medical school in Europe to have culinary medicine as part of their compulsory medical education. And we won't really stop until we're across all UK medical schools. And we're going to be creating an online course for qualified professionals as well to learn about the various aspects of health, medicine and nutrition, covering aspects like sustainability, pediatric medicine, metabolic issues, mental health, oncology, a number of different modules. So yeah, we're really trying to scale it up using a digital course.
Okay, I mean, looking in from the outside, it seems like a very obvious thing to do. What are the sort of the obstacles in getting people to accept that this is something that should be done?
Yeah, there's a number of obstacles, as I'm sure you can imagine. It's really about getting the right people in the room. And from the start, we were adamant that culinary medicine will be a trifecta of the dietitian, the general practitioner or doctor, but also the catering profession at large and a professional chef. And having those people in a room where you have medical students, you have culinary students, and you have some dietetic students as well coming along. That facilitates tons of conversations that breaks down those traditional barriers. And I'm a firm believer that one party alone can't lead this mammoth problem. And won't be at the solution of it. So it can't just be the dietetic organizations. It can't just be someone like SACN or the Scientific Advisory Committee for Nutrition. It has to be a collaborative effort. And that's what culinary medicine has sort of embodied right from the start. And the fact that we're at medical schools is great, but we also want to be in nursing colleges and also have a suite of courses for the catering profession too.
Okay, yeah, I mean, actually that sort of brings me on to the next topic. I was interested to find out about whether the concept of culinary medicine has any sort of value and use outside of medicine itself, in perhaps schools, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something I get asked about a lot. And there's only so many hours in the day, I think, right now. And I think our strengths play to getting healthcare organizations involved and different schooling organizations, so nursing colleges and medical colleges, etc. But we are trying to think about ways in which we can engage schools and schooling communities. There are some fantastic organizations already doing some great work. So it would probably be in a way of consultancy and advisory on what they can do better and how we can support them and their activities already. And the other thing I think is really important, as this is, the plant-based week, we're pretty agnostic when it comes to dietary intervention. So we try to meet people where they're at, and we try not to instill on them that they need to eat a Mediterranean style diet, or they need to go vegan, or they can only have a paleo or low grain, whatever. We meet people where they're at, and we appreciate the evidence base for the therapeutic values of different diets. So I think it's super important to maintain that sort of approach. And that's put us in really good stead. We haven't really stood on anyone else's toes right now. And hopefully we can get involved in wider environments like schools and other public sector arenas.
I mean, how important is it, do you think, for children, I mean, I guess, the whole population, to understand the benefits of a more plant-based diet for the health? And obviously, there are environmental reasons why it's a good idea too.
Definitely. I mean, they're going to be the future of saving the planet. And when I say saving the planet, I don't mean the term loosely. It's literally the job of us to save the planet. And if we can instill the virtue of eating well for human health and environmental health right from the start, and I think that's definitely a win. And I think the other thing that I've noticed, and this is another reason why I started the Doctor's Kitchen in the first place, the level of culinary literacy is pretty low. And one of the things that spurred me on to do YouTube videos and tutorials and all that kind of stuff was a scenario where I had a patient and I was teaching him how to make oats and change up his breakfast routine. And as he left, he turned around kind of in an embarrassing way and said, "Would you mind showing me how to make oats, like from scratch?" And I just assumed that he knew how to make oats and I was just teaching him about toppings. So I think there is that level of that huge disconnect that we have, where we might think it's quite simple, but actually there is a huge proportion of the population that are being left behind when it comes to looking after themselves. And we need to instill that from childhood.
Sure, okay. In 2020, we ran a campaign encouraging public sector caterers to reduce their use of red meat by 20% and to use any savings to buy better quality UK sourced meat. I'd be interested to find out from you, how important is it, do you think, to include red meat in a balanced diet?
Yeah, it's quite a controversial subject, I think. I have moved along from thinking that it's a necessary requirement for a balanced diet to a luxurious element of diet that I think we should entertain. So, looking at it pragmatically from a nutrition point of view, Meat in its various forms is full of amino acids, B vitamin profile. It's, you know, a convenient source of all those different proteins. However, the levels of consumption that we currently have at the moment are just quite unsustainable. And the more I've learned about plant-based diets and plant-forward diets, I've realized that you can achieve a better diet by going largely plant-based with the occasional inclusion of red meat if you choose to. So by that I mean you get your proteins and you get your fiber from beans, pulses, nuts, legumes combined with whole grains, and you focus your meals around that. The caveat to that, and I should mention as a caveat, is that some people do suffer from intolerances. In fact, I've just done a podcast today about the level of intolerance that is increasing worldwide. And so if you are intolerant to certain elements included in the whole food plant-based diet, like legumes, for example, or certain types of grain, then you're really limiting your ability to secure a sufficient diet. And that's where I think animal products might play a greater role. But I think for most of us, it's a luxury rather than a necessity.
Okay, I mean, there is obviously also the sort of the debate, particularly with like sort of teenage girls not getting enough iron in their diet. A plant-based diet can supply enough iron. Is that, are you sort of comfortable with that idea?
Absolutely, yeah. So you can get a number of different types of iron from various sources. And calcium as well, which is another thing that is high on people's agenda when they think about removing animal products. So nuts and beans are very good sources. Different types of greens obviously have got those different sources, and you can increase the absorption of those with a combination of vitamin C by upwards of 2/3 or 60%. So if you have a well-balanced plant-forward diet, you can achieve that for sure. Yeah.
Okay. And how important is it to the sort of the whole debate about plant-based diets that you're talking about ensuring the quality and sustainability of any meat that you do offer is of the highest standard?
Yeah, I think most people are aware that when you create meat or you produce meat, it requires a significant resource, and we want to be mindful of the sustainability of that. And I think that's another reason, I'm sure we'll get into a bit later, as to why I'm a big fan of having a plant-forward diet where possible. Provenance is a very important thing. The knowledge of how your animal products have been produced is super important as well, because that does affect the quality of the meat that's produced. There are some studies looking at grass-fed versus corn-fed as well, that offer benefits from the grass-fed. And also the stress of the animal as well, and how comfortable the animal has been throughout their life cycle also impacts the quality of the meat that is produced too. So these are all things that are very, very important. And I think we want to also be UK forward when it comes to animal products from the sustainability angle, but also from the quality angle too.
Okay, you use a term there, and I'm not sure if I heard it properly. Plant forward.
Yeah.
Did you say? Perhaps you could just explain that for people.
Yeah, sure. So I use plant forward, plant-based and plant focused interchangeably. And all that really means is that it's 85% plant-based with an option to have animal products as part of your diet, whether that be from dairy, red meat, and poultry, and fish as well. I do think a lot of people, including vegans, are on the fence about fish as whether that's a necessary part of the diet. I think it's quite hard for a lot of people to get the necessary omega-3 long-chain fatty acids, but you can supplement with that, but it is a costly element to it as well. But yeah, when I say plant focus or plant forward, I mean largely plants.
Okay, right, fair enough. That's clarified things. Yeah. It was interesting the point you were making just before that. About the environmental argument for consuming a more plant-based diet. Is that part of what you are teaching when you talk about culinary medicine and good nutrition?
Yeah, we definitely talk about the impact and sustainability. I mean, it requires a significant amount of resource. The area used for grazing, for example, there's deforestation, which is a significant contributor to climate change. The Eat Lancet report, I think, that came out in 2019, of which the UK government, I believe, were part of, really kind of painted the clear picture of how little animal products we need in an optimal diet, as well as one that is preferable from an environmental point of view. I think a lot of people come around to the idea that we have an over-reliance on animal products, and we can actually get sufficiency as well as optimal diets from a plant-forward diet as well. And I think the other things are the intangibles of relying on meats like antimicrobial resistance and increasing the risk of AMR. And if the pandemic's taught us anything, it's we are uniquely vulnerable to pandemics. And the virus, I think now we're comfortable with. It's a nasty, nasty virus, don't get me wrong, but it's not as lethal as we thought. If we have an antimicrobial problem, which is almost guaranteed over the next 30 years, we're going to have a significant issue on our hands. If I can't use antimicrobials as a doctor in a clinical environment, it's not going to be great. And we know that an over-reliance on animal products exacerbates that problem. So there are a number of different reasons as to why we need to think about plant-forward diets, and environmentalism and sustainability definitely comes into it.
Great, thank you. The National Food Strategy is currently reviewing the UK's approach to food, obesity, the environmental impact of the way we eat. What are the key points that you would like to see included in any review for consumers and for public sector caterers?
Yeah, I think highlighting the points that we've just spoken about now, I think, and making sure it's part of the vernacular that we use whenever we talk about food is super important. So not only is it about sustainability and production, but it's also from the perspective of human health and environmental health. And I think if we can communicate that specifically in documents and the way we talk about how we procure food, I think that will be for the betterment of public knowledge around this area, as well as the type of food that we have available to us in different arenas. And it also serves to improve the culture around food, because I think right now our default is processed, highly processed, and we don't really think about food in a conscious manner. And I think we need to change that so we understand provenance of food, where it's coming from, as well as its impact on personal health and environmental health.
Okay. As well as the National Food Strategy, there's government food buying standards also being reviewed. The leaders of the national public sector catering organisations are preparing to submit their own ideas. From a sort of plant-based food perspective, what do you think they should be including in any buying standards?
Yeah. So the buying standards are very interesting. I think it was a great effort in terms of trying to get sustainability, health and nutrition, the balanced scorecard, I believe it was, that gives a general understanding or an attempt at giving a general understanding of the complexity of the environment. And I think really to echo what those government buying standards already are would be a good thing from the social point of view, quality of service, etc. From a plant-based perspective, I think getting used to the idea of a plant-forward diet and having that built into those standards would be brilliant. And when I say that, I think the commonest questions that I get, whether this be in a professional environment or on social media or just speaking to the public, is where do you get your protein? Is a plant-forward diet sufficient for all stages of life, whether you're a young teenage girl or you're an older gentleman? You know, is a plant-forward diet enough to sustain me throughout all those different types of life cycles? And I think we need to get around to the idea of promoting why yes, and how we do that using those standards. And I think the quality, particularly as it pertains to the government buying standards with health and nutrition, should demonstrate a clear understanding of the need for high fiber items, whole grains, nuts, beans and pulses, and minimal processing as much as possible, to the point where I think we should really have limitations on the sugary, ultra processed foods that are currently, I don't know if they're permitted, but they certainly do tend to pop up in public sector environments all the time. Certainly in my hospital anyway. But yeah, I think that it needs to be a little bit more ambitious in that respect. I understand that compliance is an issue, though. Even if you have very good, robust government buying standards, compliance can be problematic. So that probably needs to be paid a little bit more attention to as well.
Yeah, but very interesting point. Compliance. I think Andy Jones, who's going to be joining us later for the panel debate, might have something to say about that. I wanted now to move on to preparing plant-based dishes, and to ask you, where do you start when you're preparing to create a new recipe?
Yeah, so I use a 3-2-1 approach whenever I think about recipe creating these days. So it's a very simple formula. Every portion per person should have 3 portions of fruit, vegetables, nuts, or seeds. Should be 2 portions per serving, and all using 1 pan. And that's more of a consumer-facing perspective rather than a sort of catering perspective, I imagine. But the reason why I use a 3-2-1 approach is because when you look at some of the evidence base, we should actually be eating closer to 10 portions a day, which is the equivalent of 800 grams of fruit and veg per day, which seems like a lot. And I know it seems very unsustainable to even try and get there. But if we're looking at optimal consumption, then that's really where we want to be aiming to get to. It sounds expensive, but I did a whole BBC iPlayer series about how you can do £1 meals and do it for less than £1 a portion. And also, I think, again, from a cultural point of view, getting used to this idea of being a lot more aspirational with our fruit and vegetable consumption and showing people how easily it can be done. That's really where I sort of start from. And the other 2 things are flavor, as well as who is going to be my customer. So I'm in a very privileged position where I get to chat to people via the NHS from Korean background, Filipino background, Sri Lankan background. We have, London is a melting pot of different cultures. And so when I talk to people about food, I often ask about what they generally eat, whether it's curry and rice, whether it's paella, whether it's, all the different grains, and I try and adapt the recipes for them. And that's why whenever you look at my recipes online, they skip through different cultural backgrounds, and it's because I'm basically reflecting what other people want to eat.
Okay, interesting. I'd be interested now to get maybe some advice from you for chefs who want to make appealing plant-based dishes. They're not necessarily greatly experienced in this endeavor. And are there any special considerations when your customers are children or elderly people, for example, with obviously special nutritional requirements?
Yeah. So I've done some work with caterers in a professional capacity in the past, and I always ask them to think about who does it best. So who does plant-based eating best? And I always turn to India. 30% of that population are vegetarian or completely plant-based. A lot of the Asian countries as well, they don't mimic meat. They let those dishes speak for themselves instead of pretending to be something else. So faux meats and mock hamburger patties, I understand that they have their place. But really, if you really want plant-based dishes to sing for themselves, I would try and keep it true to their origins. The exceptions to the rule are children, like you mentioned. So I think in that capacity, we want to try and entice them as much as possible. And that can be easier by mimicking kind of the things that they currently enjoy, until we get to the point where, they actually do enjoy like simple roasted vegetables with a few spices. The other thing I think, which you said was quite interesting with regards to elderly people, is changes to food habits can take time. And also you want to be mindful of the microbiota of elderly people. So that's the population of microbes that live in and around our body, largely in our gut, mostly bacteria, but it also contains viruses and nematodes and fungi. And that is uniquely susceptible to shifts in our diet. So we need to increase the fiber content, particularly in our elderly populations, because we know that your microbiota generally reduces in diversity and reduces in its ability to do its job essentially as we age. So we want to increase the fiber content, but that can take time. It can be troublesome for a lot of people over the age of 65.
Okay, all right, thank you. And lastly, I want to just ask you about food waste, which is a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. Do you have any thoughts about how maximum taste and nutrition can be combined with a reduction in food waste?
Yeah. So I've just done a whole program about this actually with Prue Leith that's coming out next Monday. So make sure you're watching that.
All right.
But you're right. It's if food waste was a country, it'd be the third biggest greenhouse gas emitter on the planet. Some of the stats that I came across as part of the research for doing the program were pretty phenomenal. About a third of food produced globally is wasted. 70% of food waste is actually produced by households as well. So it comes down, yes, along the supply chain, there is some waste, but a lot of it comes down to the consumer as well. And a lot of that food is, food that we could have eaten. And the one thing I learned from doing this program is some of the reasons as to why people throw away food is because they just didn't know what to do with it. Like an old bag of salad, half an onion, or they get a fruit and veg box, which are fantastic, but they don't know what half of the products are. So there could be some interesting avenues for digital platforms where they can be educated on how to use leftover foods, and other apps like Olio, for example, that redistribute food to people who want it at no cost, I think is another thing that could be scaled up as well. But global food waste is a huge problem, and hopefully people understand the negative implications on climate change by throwing away those half-empty packets and stuff that compound over time as well.
Okay, thank you. I've got some questions coming in from our participants now, and I'd like to sort of, if I can, sort of throw one or two of those your way.
Yeah, go for it.
We've got a Melanie Gilbert who works at the Kingston Hospital NHS Trust. So she has a worry from her trust's dietitian that because vegan dishes are lower in both calories and protein, it's a struggle to get vegan patients up to the minimum nutrition for their needs. That's a bit of a concern if it's a dietitian who's raising those worries, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the issues, I think, particularly with people who are have problems eating, whether they have dysphagia or whether they have poor appetite as a result of medications, is that they struggle to get the amount of energy that they need for requirements. And I think those are unique scenarios where you have to try and use meal replacement shakes, and they do have vegan replacement shakes as well. So if people are concerned about calorie content for a vegan patient, there are actually avenues where you can actually get calories in. I think we're also moving away, more generally speaking, away from the calories in, calories out argument, particularly when it pertains to obesity too. And most vegan patients, as long as they're doing it the right way, are generally healthier than the population at large. But that isn't to say that just because you're vegan, you're healthier. You can still drink Coca-Cola and Oreo cookies, nothing against those companies, but you can still have that and still be vegan. So, there are different shades of veganism out there.
Okay, got another one for you here. It's from Adrian Beale of Buckley & Beale, who's a food importer. And he's asking about the definition of the term plant-based and how can we communicate this to the public? Sorry, I was just going to say, he talks about a number of far from healthy products on the market that using the term.
100%, yeah. And this is kind of one of the bugbears for me. And I think whenever we talk about a healthier diet, we should really be saying whole food plant-based, which implies that we're talking about minimally processed whole foods in fruit and veg form that haven't been ultra processed, because you're right, you can call something plant-based and it can be horrifically troublesome from a health point of view. Sugar is plant-based, all those high additives as well, those are all plant-based. So, you have to be really careful about the term and actually how that, again, from a cultural point of view, seems to imply that it's healthy because it's plant-based. That isn't the case at all. Plant-based as a term is quite interesting because most people would assume that plant-based means vegan. Actually, from a scientific point of view, plant-based actually generally means largely plants. So if you ever read an academic article and it says we put people on a plant-based diet, if you read the fine print, sometimes it says it was like 85 or 90% plants, but it still included some animal products. So it's one to look out for in the literature.
Okay, a bit of a cry from the heart here from Jane Kavanagh of the Wrighton, Wigan and Lee NHS Trust, who says she totally believes in your message, but how do we encourage staff and patients to eat more plant-based meals when our own ward staff don't always agree with such changes and so don't encourage patients to try something different?
Yeah, I know it's a struggle, and to be honest, I'm used to chatting to my A&E department colleagues about this now. They all know what kind of position I'm coming from, and so we can have pragmatic conversations about it. But initially, there was a lot of skepticism, and I'm a skeptic. I think we should all be skeptics, but we shouldn't be cynics. A skeptic is whose mind can be changed, given the data and given some evidence. A cynic is someone who's already made their mind up. And unfortunately, there are a few cynics out there. And this is one of the reasons why I want to get culinary medicine into the curricula and into nursing curricula as well, because that's how we institute cultural change that can facilitate those conversations, those really necessary conversations to patients and to their families. I think you also need to be a bit of a seer to believe it. And so my personal experience was my gateway into this sort of way of living and the research behind it. But I can understand, had I not had that experience, I probably would have been pretty skeptical myself, even to this day. So there's a bit of a challenge, but I think these kind of events and raising the conversation, demonstrating the evidence as well, looking at the data that shows human health as well as environmental health can be improved with a plant-forward diet, I think that's the way forward. Okay.
We've got a question here that actually covers questions from a number of different people. And is there any good evidence that if patients choose a plant-based diet offer in hospital, it will aid their recovery and improve their health?
That's a really good question. There hasn't been too many in the way of randomized controlled trials looking at plant-based diet offerings post a surgical outcome or post-hospital stay. We do know that a well-planned diet post-hospital can reduce recurrence rates and readmission rates, which is why you're seeing in the National Institutes of Health, there's a $3 million budget that's been given to the Food as Medicine Research Group that is hopefully going to show, as they did in their pilot study, that you can reduce readmission rates. And from an insurance point of view, because it's quite different out there in the US, that would be very, very interesting. And that would really pave the way for more activity in this field. I believe that will be Mediterranean focused. It will still be plant forward, plant focused, but it won't be 100% vegan or vegetarian. I would say I'm personally not vegan or vegetarian. Like I said, I'm plant-based. And I think that is certainly the way for a lot of people. But if we can aim for 100% plants, if possible, most people will kind of meet us halfway. And that's why I'm a big believer in this, in giving plant-based options in those sorts of environments.
Okay, I've got one from Matthew White now, who says they're actually taking a plant-forward approach. He works at the University of Reading, incorporating plants into traditional meat recipes, such as mushrooms in the mince for burger and lentils in cottage pie. He wants your thoughts on this, and also, do you have any tricks up your sleeve to aid this approach and help customers to choose these options?
Oh yeah, definitely. So I think that's a great approach. Rather than using mock meats, using whole ingredients like mushrooms, fantastic. Bringing out the umami flavors of those natural ingredients like tomatoes and mushrooms. Using flavor enhancers like soy or tamari would be brilliant. And I think there was some interesting research looking at behavior change on the basis of what you label ingredients as. So if you labeled something as like a healthy lasagna, people are less likely to opt into the healthy lasagna, and in fact opted for the more luxurious option. So if you say like a creamy lasagna with a gorgeous mushroom sauce or something like that, most people opt for that. So it'll be an interesting experiment to do maybe in the canteen across different weeks, and see by changing the name of the product instead of the actual contents of it, and see whether that changes uptake or not. Okay,
I've got a slightly technical question here now, which I'm not sure whether you will be able to help with, but Helen Westwood, who works at Northern General Hospital, says she's interested in finding dishes that can go through the cook-chill process and be reheated in one of the dining rooms, or as a grab-and-go option. Well, is this anything that your sort of work has taken in at all?
So the cook-chill process, I'm not too sure. I think it's like reheating. I think that's what she means. There's probably a good few staples, but from a catering perspective, I'm not too sure. The ones that spring to mind are like a five veg shepherd's pie. Soups as well can sort of withstand that, I believe. But I think that's more from the chef's perspective. I wish my professional chef was with me for this. Could tackle that question for us.
Okay. And another one that really is sort of coming in a little bit from left field, but
Sure.
it is an issue that we obviously need to consider. The focus on plant-based foods is all very well, but she says, what is the future for our farmers if we're moving towards plant-based foods more? And what will happen to animals in general?
I think it's a really important question and a really important point that we shouldn't skirt around. I think there is definitely a future for farmers and animal production, for sure. Healthy farms, whether they be producing plants or not, do need animals on them as well. I think we know a lot from regenerative agriculture and the quality of the soil and the soil biome. It does require animals and moving different paddocks and stuff. I think there's always going to be a market for animal products that are going to be produced ethically with the highest standards of welfare and the highest quality meat. I don't think that's going to go away. Hopefully the plant-based message isn't accusatory in that you have to eat meat or you're shamed into eating meat because of the environmental concerns. I think the Eat Lancet report really did show that it wasn't going to a fully 100% vegan diet. It was 10%, which is a reduction, a massive reduction of what we're currently doing now. And I think the more we eat consciously, the price of animal products should go up. And I'm actually a believer that they should go up because they should be seen as a luxury item. In the same way, good quality coffee is a lot more expensive than the instant kind. And that's a price that we should be, as consumers, willing to pay.
Okay, thank you. One thing we haven't really touched on at all is sort of allergens and food intolerances. Is a plant-based diet, it isn't necessarily going to skirt around those problems. You still have to be careful, don't you?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. So with the exception of obviously shellfish allergy, which is a big one, and a couple others, plant-based eating shouldn't really change food allergy issues. The one thing I would say, so just on a podcast with Professor Nadeau that's come out today, all about the rise in food allergy at a global level. And there are three core hypotheses as to why this might be happening. An ultra high processed diet, which negatively impacts your microbiome. A lack of fiber in one's diet, which again has that impact on not providing substrate for the different bacteria and fungi and nematodes that offer immune protection and inflammatory reduction as well. And the other thing is hypersanitized environments, where obviously during a pandemic it's a bit of an issue, but I think we might be accelerating the problem as well that's inherent in that. So there are some potential benefits of a well-planned plant-forward diet, where you have more fiber, which can nurture your microbiome, but the grander issues as to why people have peanut allergies and the other problems within the catering sector that I'm sure everyone is aware of, those aren't going to go away with just changing what's on the menu.
Oh, okay. I know that you've touched on this point already, but it might be that worth just exploring in a little bit more detail. Someone said that on menus in hospitals, schools, etc., plant-based meals are often presented as if they're inferior, i.e. meat dishes usually come first. So obviously that is a problem. What's the way around it? How do we encourage people to try the dishes? How can you manipulate the menu to work to get the result you want?
Yeah. So if the result we want is to nudge people towards the healthier option, I think that's always the crux of it. So regardless of it's plant-based or meat-based, it needs to be the healthier option. That's what we're going for. So as long as we're nudging people in the healthier direction, there can be some interesting things that you can do within the food environment and the canteen environment using choice architecture. So Google famously did this, where they put water stands right at the front where they get people's trays. So that was the immediate option for their employees and anyone going into the canteen to opt for water instead of the high sugary sweetened beverages that are kept in a chiller at a different area. changing where you put the options on the menu as well. So you heightened or make it like the special of the day, that can increase uptake. And also the naming process that we touched on earlier. So how you describe the product that you want people to eat, make it luxurious, make it, okay, it's still healthy, but it's still going to be flavorful. And I think the two don't necessarily always marry with each other. And I think it's an interesting play on how you can increase uptake by making sure that people understand it's going to be absolutely flavorful, as well as, yeah, the health benefits are there, but it's going to be flavor first.
That's great. Thank you very much for that, Rupy. We do have to sort of move on because we've got other things we need to talk about. And obviously, we very much hope that you're going to be part of the panel discussion in a little while's time. But now it's, I'd like to ask Simon Billing, the Chief Executive of the Eating Better Alliance, to give us a brief overview of the research that we've just launched into how the public sector has tackled the idea of serving less and better meat. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning. Thank you, David. Thank you, Rupy. That was a really excellent presentation. I enjoyed listening to all of it, everything. Just as a way of introduction, we're an alliance of over 60 organizations now, civil society organizations representing health, representing animal welfare, representing environmental issues. And we're calling for a more plant-forward diet, a reduction in meat, a 50% reduction in meat, and a shift to better, higher standards of meat and dairy. And we've been working with the public sector because we really believe that it's about increasing better choices, making the spaces that we eat with fantastic options. And we're really pleased, as David spoke to 2 years ago, of the commitment that was made across the public sector to just go out and try it, just make a commitment to reduce. And as David said, there was a commitment for 20%. So we thought we'd go out and survey together and find out what was going on and how people were doing. Really good news in the sense there's a really clear focus on momentum, very impressive leadership from across the public sector. 80% of those of you who filled in the survey and came back to us said you were committed to reducing your meat across your menus. So that's fantastic and a really positive story. And on top of that, Rupy will be pleased to hear 83% are saying they're increasing their plant proteins. That's the really good stuff, the beans and lentils in their dishes. And many of you are also committing to using meat substitutes in dishes, and it increased that by a fifth. So that's really great news. One word of caution, I want to pick David up from the beginning of this session, was we are seeing an increase in chicken on the menu. We don't think that's a good thing, and maybe it's something we can pick up later, but we don't think substituting red meat for white meat is the right thing. There's serious trade-offs from an environmental, animal welfare and health. We do want to see a more plant-based diet. So that's just one watch out from what you've told us. The other really positive thing is that you are really committed across the public sector to improving animal welfare and environmental standards of the meat and protein you use. As Rupy talked about, meat and dairy we should view differently as a luxury, as a treat. We need to really buy and increase the standards of what we buy. So that's really good. And then at the same time, what are we seeing less of? I think you told us that we're seeing less of red meat. So demand is dropping around red meat, and in particular around processed meat. So 60% responded and said processed meat was something in decline. What's driving this change? And I think Andy will probably speak to this on this session. Overwhelmingly, people told us that this is about climate change, but not just about people's interest in climate change, but also at the same level, individual health, nature loss, and also, as I've just talked about, a commitment to animal welfare. So the good news is that it's happening, and caterers are doing it. And the sort of things that you've told us about, and it's all in our report and survey, you're putting meat-free dishes higher up the menu, what Rupy talked about, the choice architecture, you're already doing it. You're offering meat substitute, meat-free days, you're making vegetables more prominent in the dishes. So there's lots of great experiences across the public sector that are already going on, lots to share. I'm sure we'll hear from Nick as well on the panel around ways of doing it. Lots of commitments to higher standards in British. And I think what's been really inspiring about this week is the common chorus across civil society, the public sector, and many leading businesses on the need for this transition. So I hope this creates the opportunity for the food strategy and the government buying standards, and for government to really step up to the plate to support us all to eat better.
Thank you very much, Simon. Nice sort of summary of where we stand on that particular aspect of the whole discussion about plant-based foods. If you want to read the full report, then you can access it via our own public sector catering website, or via the Eating Better website too. And that sets the scene very well for the next part of today's webinar, when we invite some other voices to join us and give us their thoughts. We have Andy Jones, chair of the Public Sector Catering 100 group. Good morning, Andy.
Good morning. Good morning, David.
There's Alexia Robinson, chief executive of Love British Food. Hello, Alexia. You're muted at the moment, Alexia. Could you just... No? Try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, coming through loud and clear. Great.
Sorry.
We're also joined by Nick Vadis, Culinary Director of Compass Group UK. Thanks for joining us, Nick.
Hi, David. Hi, everybody.
And I'd like to ask each of you just to give us your thoughts about what you've heard today, and then we'll take some more questions. Alexia, I know you joined us late, but you will have heard a little bit about what's going on, and you'll have some of your own thoughts on this. Plant-based week, it's obviously an important thing. Public sector caterers are getting behind it. What's your feeling on it?
Well, firstly, David and Andrew, thank you very much indeed for inviting me to speak on this, because I'm loath, Ruby, to use the word skeptic, because you're quite right, that's not a very helpful word, but you're kind to invite me on because it's well known that I am skeptical about this. And when the PSC 100 group first discussed moving to introducing a campaign for 20% less meat, I was passionate about the messaging being what I felt was really wrong. And I'm so pleased that since that discussion, which was now before lockdown, the messaging has moved more palatably, really, to a conversation about, yes, eat less meat, but eat more quality meat. But things have now moved to plant-based week, which it is well known I have concerns about it. That said, Simon and Ruby, there is nothing you've said that I disagree with. And so hooray, hooray for it all. And I think, I don't know how many opportunities I'm going to have to express my views going forward. So I don't want to hog all the limelight now, but I just think what this shows is with an intelligence and with understanding, with the facts at your fingertips, it is easy to make sense of Plant-Based Week in a way that is good for people's nutrition, good for the environment, good for farming. My concern is that it can very easily become a fad. And when you take it away from people like Ruby who are expert, or you take it away from nutritionists and school teachers who contacted me over the last 2 weeks when they knew I was speaking on this and have expressed real concerns, my worry is that this could become a trendy fad that people with less knowledge interpret in an extreme form, and we will then be doing a disservice to the children, the elderly, the recovering in hospital, about whom we care about a lot. So I can talk about that more, but I won't hog my moment in the limelight.
Thank you very much for sharing that thoughts. And perhaps I could, just before we go to the rest of the panel, just ask Rupy for his thoughts about this. I mean, Is there any concern in your mind about the sort of the untrained, if you like, jumping on this and this perhaps not serving up a good nutritional balanced diet as a result?
Yeah, no, totally. I would say I agree, and I would say one step further. I think it's already become a fad, and you only have to look online for a little bit to see just how damaging the messaging can be if told from an uneducated and an uncompassionate way, where people are dramatically told that they have to go 100% plant-based, otherwise you're doing a disservice to your environment, your health, etc., etc., etc. There's definitely all shades of grey in this, and I'm a big believer that we need to be messaging in the correct way. I would say that plant-based week and the grander picture is that you only have to look at the numbers. We consume way too much at the moment, so that there is a middle ground. The other thing that perhaps we'll get onto talking about later is that the whole plant-based messaging and vegan movement can be a bit of a shield for people who are suffering with eating disorders, who might not even be conscious of the fact that they do have an eating disorder as well. So it can be a very convenient umbrella. But that being said, I think we still need to push on with the message that we do eat too much meat and we need to be reducing it. And I think the vernacular that we use is super important.
Thank you. Nick, I'd like to bring you in now. Now, you're a chef of some standing who's sort of brought up in the sort of the traditional way that chefs are, but you've been working recently with NHS supply chain producing recipes, including a sort of a dedicated plant-based element to it that called Root Kitchen. Is that right? Perhaps you can tell us just a little bit about that?
Yeah, so just to highlight that, in my current role, I'm now, like you said, I'm kind of aligned to the NHS supply chain, which is our food buy contract, where we provide food for the NHS trusts or some of the NHS in England. And part of that job, or part of the role now, is I've been kind of launching food programs for chefs within hospitals, staff and visit feeding, but now we're spilling over into patient feeding as well. And we've launched a few concepts. And the idea of the third concept we launched is called Root Kitchen, which is predominantly plant-based. So that has gone live now. And we work with nutritionists and dietitians within our own department who analyze the menus, the dishes, the proteins, everything in those dishes, so they're fit for purpose. And it's just giving those back to the NHS. And obviously Andy knows quite a lot about these. It's about giving those back to the NHS, proper recipes where we've got proper governance over them from a robust supply chain. And, they tick all the boxes. But I understand Alexia's issues is, it could get misconstrued, or it could be, but by giving them robust recipes and a proper supply chain, you can give them a great diet and introduce these dishes. And there is actually a pull from the NHS for it. I know staff and visitor feeding, but definitely staff feeding. The demographics, a lot of the staff now, they're looking for more healthier products in their diets. They don't want to be reaching for vending machines out of hours. They want food offers that are good for them. Okay,
thank you. Andy.
Hi, David.
Your thoughts on what you've heard so far, and perhaps there's one or two things that you heard that you'd like to just sort of elaborate a little bit on.
Yeah, I think, again, Rupy, every time I hear you, you're inspirational and you say the right messages. And I think the culinary medicine is something that I'm really passionate about, because I think one thing of being, I'm entering, believe it or not, my 40th year working in the NHS. So I started when I was 4. But I think for me, one of the areas is when I first started, we had a lot of interaction with the junior doctors, the doctors who were training, the nurses who were training. Sadly, that went. And we need to get that back, so we all have an understanding of what our roles are and how food plays a vital role in it, whether it's vegetarian, plant-based food or traditional dishes with meat dishes. We have to do that. And I think what you're doing, I'd love to champion that across the whole of the NHS. And I know you're strongly into moving that forward. And I think that's the right way, because taking Alexia's point, that will allow us to get the message correct. But let's not talk about just the NHS, because this is about me in the public sector 100. We have to get that message across to all the public sector. And us caterers have to lead that with the professionals on the advice. So coming back to what Nick was saying on recipes, I do hear what Alexia's saying about fad, and I am an ambassador of Love British Food. I champion the British food. I think it's, that should be first when we do our shopping and when we do our orders, that should be first. However, I do not think it's a fad anymore. This is a change. The pandemic's brought a lot of changes to people's eating habits, and I really do think that this will drive change. People want to eat a better, healthier diet. People are more focused on the sustainability and more focused on the environment. And we've got to build on that. And we are the professionals who can build on that, David. But I do also take Simon's point as well. And I think it's a fantastic report that we've done. We are, in there, I've mentioned the public sector. We are the guardians of the nation's health. So taking on board what everybody said, Rupy, Alexia, Nick, we have to drive that forward, and some of the questions that are coming in there. And we have to get the balance right. We have to get the recipes correct. We have to share those recipes. We have to make sure that what we offer, I've recently done some changes where we've actually put the plant-based food at the top of the menu. So it's that eye level, bi level, also in the restaurant. That's seen a fundamental change. But the reason I've done that is because it was my customers who were asking for it. It was those who was asking for that change. But it was great to hear Rupy mention government buying standards. We are doing some work as with all the associations around this. And Rupy, you're absolutely right. We do need to bring in the things like high fat, the sugar thing in there. And rest assured, we will do that now. We'll take that comment on board and we'll embed that into those changes. But for me, it's about how, when we've got these standards, how do we monitor them? How do we ensure that people are focused on them? And coming back to Alexia, within that, how do we know people are buying British food first on there? So we'll embed those changes into it, because we must do. We are the guardians of the nation's gardens and the nation's health. So really, David, for me, picking up on key points, and I'm really looking forward to the debate. I don't want to argue it all, but it's about working together. It's about collaborative partnership here. But plant-based is here, and it's not a fad. It's something that's going to flourish and grow, but it's part of the diet. I'm a meat eater as well, but I have reduced it. I've amended my recipes accordingly.
Okay, thanks very much. Simon, I don't know whether you wanted to just elaborate a little bit on the point you were making about chicken, but also perhaps you can also talk to us about whether this is a fad, whether we've reached sort of like peak plant-based interest, or whether there's still an awful lot further to go on this.
No, I mean, absolutely, like Rupy, I'm in the thick of this. I kept the similar questions that he's had on the panel, and I think we're just at the start of this, absolutely at the start of this, and attitudes are changing, particularly amongst young people. I think Rupy spoke to those sort of 18 to 35s. The heightened concerns around environmental issues. This isn't going away. This isn't a fad. This is here to stay. And the sort of the change and the sort of eat Lancet, what we set out, and Rupy spoke to that sort of higher level of targets and transition. We're on that trajectory, and I think the public sector has dipped its toes in and is showing that it can do it as well. So I think that's really positive. I think for those of you that know Eating Better, it is about eating better. And we've done some work recently around better meat in particular. And Rupy spoke about this eloquently as well. We're not a vegan advocacy organization. We are talking about meeting halfway, or better by half, as our expression is, around a sort of 50% cut in meat in our diets. I do think we do need to be conscious across, and Andy and I have talked about this, conscious about the meat that we buy and buying to higher standards. That, chicken, for us, we should be reducing chicken. We should be replacing it with plant-based or beautiful grass-fed meat. But this sort of chicken, I would say chicken is a bit of a fad if we want to talk about fads. The Nando's effect, someone said to me, around young people. 95% is intensive industrial indoors, chicken misery, as I probably shorthand do it now. That's the direction of travel. lot of it is imported. There's a lot of big discussions, as I'm sure Alexia's in, around trade and, you know, the government, meat from Australia, from Thailand, from Brazil, in all these sort of trade deals. And I think, to Andy's point, we want to be supporting the best of British farming. And I think, you know, as a group and as spending taxpayers' money, we should be doing that with a plant-forward lens. So that's a big emphasis of what we're trying to do. And it's brilliant to hear all the panel in a similar space.
Okay, thank you for that. Nick, perhaps if I can come to you now. When you were developing your recipes for Root Kitchen, was cost an element? Are the plant-based dishes any more expensive than the ones that traditionally included meat?
Well, cost is obviously an important factor in the public sector at any time, you know, with regard to, you know, what you can sell food for and what it costs to produce. But cost really doesn't play a part initially in the development side of it. We look at dishes and actually some of the plant-based products we're using in certain dishes, we can actually put less in because there's more protein in some of the products we've been using than traditional meat. And also it doesn't shrink. So if you're using chicken and things like that, it leaches water out into dishes, but it also shrinks. Whereas some of the products we've been working with from your sponsors on this page, they don't shrink. So we see a better yield. And we saw that when we did some development with a trust down in the south, where we compared some patient feeding. Our actual product that we produce for 20 portions would actually stretch to 30 portions. So again, cost was kept down there. But no, cost is not the overriding factor. The dishes are developed first, and then we work on them from there.
Okay, thank you. Rupy, I know that we're sponsored by some meat replacement companies this week, and I've seen some of the cooking demos, and the products are very good. But there's more to plant-based diets than meat replacement, isn't there?
Oh, I hope so. Yeah. Like meat replacement, I definitely think it has its place. Okay. You know, when someone wants if they are plant-based for whatever reason, whether it be for ethical reasons, whether it be religious reasons, etc., people do need to have some indulgences. However, the majority of our diet should really be singing for vegetables and fruits and nuts and seeds in their whole form. So beans, nuts, lentils, those are where you get your protein sources, rather than patties or faux meats that can be very highly processed and actually can be the detriment of the ultimate message that we're trying to do, which is to get people to live healthier and have healthier eating habits. So I'm not knocking those sort of, you know, plant-based alternatives, but the focus should really be on whole foods rather than just replacing meat by any means necessary.
Sure. Okay. Now, Andy, there have been expressed in a number of questions that we've seen today, nutrition concerns around plant-based diets for patients, especially the malnourished. Is that a reality?
I believe what we have to ensure that the recipes we use meet the BDA digestive within the NHS. And also, you know, you've got standards in schools as well, nutritional standards. So we have to ensure that the recipes we produce match those standards. I do believe that it's still a lot of education around recipes, working with the chefs and the professionals, working with our sponsors, but ensuring what we deliver. But as Rupy said, there's also people who are malnourished, even on a traditional diet, have to have some supplements. But those supplements have to be nutritious and tasty. And I think that's where we have to also look to be. And those could be plant-based as well. I think sometimes we just focus on, you know, food is part of the recovery plan. It doesn't matter where we are, it is, you know, in our in the NHS sector. But I do think the wider issue is here, food's part of people's health and well-being across all the public sector. And as public sector caterers, we have a moral responsibility to ensure whether it's a meat dish or a plant-based dish, what we produce meets those standards, and we have to drive that forward, David. And I think that's where the PSC 100 and all the fellow associations are all aligned to do that. So I think It's about ensuring, working with our dietetic colleagues, we coin the phrase power free. This is a really major issue, focus on the power free. Work together with your dietitians. It's not, I do believe there may be some certain dietary issues, but like anything, we change, we evolve, we learn, and we would do this together. And that, I think, is the way forward.
Okay, thank you. Alexia, you obviously given us some of your concerns, but I mean, British farming isn't only about meat production, is it? There's many arable farmers too. How can we sort of improve the connection between the public sector buyers and the farmers and growers in this country to make sure that good local produce is being served in schools and in hospitals?
Well, oh gosh, I mean that's a huge question. I'll come on to the specifics of that in a moment, David, if I may. But some thoughts that I have about how we can evolve this. I mean, when I was brought up, when we were all brought up, we were all told to eat more fruit and veg. And now we're talking about eating more a plant-based diet. So things have already, the terminology has moved. And actually, hooray that we're talking about plant-based, not fruit and veg, because of course the plant that grows in this country more than any is grass. And everybody has talked about grass-fed meat systems, and there's a depth of understanding and appreciation of their role both in our environment and in our nutrition. And I just wonder, going forward to next year, whether the logo for Plant-Based Week could actually maybe include a cow or a sheep to make the point that these are actually part of the plant-based diet. The most efficient way of converting grass, the plant that grows most in this country, into protein is via livestock. And I also wonder if, as part of our responsibility, particularly to young teenage girls, which is something I really worry about, and I've had nutritionists and school cooks talk to me over the last 2 weeks, and they're almost in tears with worry that I worry if we start to roll out plant-based menus in, for example, something at school with vulnerable girls who are influenced by social media, that they will then take it home and reinterpret it in a way that is not good for their health. And I'd wonder if we all talk about balance and eating better and things, about whether the message to chefs in the public sector is to actually include some form of grass-fed meat within the menu, but to make the point that it's grass-fed, so that you're using the menu to educate, and you're not just you're not excluding meat. I don't know what the rest of the panel feels about that. I realise I actually haven't answered your question, David. Sorry.
Okay. I mean, interesting point there. Rupy, perhaps you can give us your response to that. The concern about these diets being taken home and sort of misinterpreted, if you like.
Yeah. So I appreciate the concern. I think it's definitely a necessary conversation to have with regard to eating disorders and how certain diets can be utilized for harm as well as health, and that is a significant consideration, not just teenage girls and in young adults, male adults as well. In their 20s, we know that eating disorders has risen over the pandemic period as more people spend more time online. I think that's definitely a consideration with any public messaging project. However, to put a cow on plant-based week's logos, I think is sort of at the detriment of the message. And yes, I know we should be striving for balance, but right now the balance is heavily weighed towards overconsumption of poor quality animal products and poor quality food in general, I would say. So I take your point, but I don't agree that it should change in that respect. And I think just having a week where, we improve people's knowledge of the benefits of eating plants and largely plants for the planet and environmental health and human health, I think that's necessary, but I don't think it's, something that should include a cow on the logo. Those are my thoughts anyway. Okay. I think it could create mixed messaging.
Yeah, no, Very good point. Yeah. Simon, I'm moving on now, and we've got a question in about the stigma behind the word vegan. And I know that you've made the point about Eating Better's sort of stance on this. He says, I struggle to find common ground as we are either not vegan enough or pushing the vegan agenda. How do you deal with that dilemma?
Well, David, I think what we're doing this week is we're talking positively about plant-based. Rupy said plant forward. We're not necessarily using logos. I try to not to use the V logo, but of course there is lots of experience from vegans, vegan cookery, vegetarian. So I'm not dismissing that either, because I think, it's an interesting diet and a mindful way of eating. So I think what we're trying to say, and we're not trying to polarize and create some sort of culture war on this topic. We're suggesting that moving to a more plant-based diet is good for the health, good for the planet, fundamentally, where we need to move very quickly, as Rupy said, and can be good for animal welfare. So I think it's a really critical that we find the right language and the right narrative, to Alexia's point, that is not, doesn't create some sort of, challenges. But I think, I sort of build on what Rupy said, really. This is a real opportunity to celebrate and to promote this sort of way of cooking and way of eating. It's only for a week and we only need to go further, but we've known events like Veganuary just gives us a focus on promotion. We try things, we do things a bit differently, and it's helped me at a personal level. And I think that's the inspiration, and that's what I find quite inspiring. So, I like it. I like a conversation around better, and I'd like to see, but I'd rather us talking about the chicken versus red meat dilemma than, getting into whether it should be a cow or a sheep on the logo. Let's get into the serious issues on this.
Okay, thank you. Nick, another point that's come up here is the need when you are putting together a sort of plant-based options for menus, whether that's in hospitals or schools, for instance, is the need not just to sort of from a catering perspective, but from the sort of the parents of school children and the friends of and relatives of patients. How do you deal with that particular aspect of things?
So, I mean, we talk about schools, parents are kept well informed on menus and the choices available. They don't go in blind. They pick their meals usually the week before, what they want. It's the education process, and the same within the NHS, from what I'm doing with launching the food programs for the NHS. I didn't mention earlier, but we've launched a Chef's Academy as well, which links in with a hospital food review, which was just released last year, whereby we get chefs to particular venues around the country and we train them on, different cuisines. So we're doing one on Monday at the University of West London, where we've got 10 NHS chefs from different trusts around the London area, and they'll come and cook plant-based dishes for the day with us. And obviously, it's the education process. So it's educating the chefs, and educating the chefs within schools to convey that message. And to me, it's getting the chefs on board and getting the catering managers on board. I think, like Andy said, we almost have a moral responsibility to give people a good choice in these venues, because, invariably they're eating with us 5-6 days a week. So it's not like a restaurant where you go maybe once a fortnight or once a month. We have to make sure the balance is right. And coming back to what Simon was saying, with where we're not trying to take out meat totally, but what we have been doing, we did this about 10 years ago. We did a project where it was called Health by Stealth. So what we did is we took elements of meat out of a dish and substituted it with more plant-based products. Plant-based wasn't even talked about, and it was more vegetables. So, and just took some of the meat content down, and that was Health by Stealth, which we did for one of our main clients who asked us to carry out that piece of work.
And what was the result of this Health by Stealth? Did you get away with it?
Absolutely. I mean, people, as long as the food looks great and tastes great, You know, people don't. I think it was a burger. And I know a burger's processed, but this was proper ground beef that was used in the burger, and we replaced, I think it was 25% of the meat with a duxelle mixture of mushrooms, and then bound it in the same way, and nobody really noticed. Actually, the burger was more moist and was a better eat from a texture point of view than 100% meat, and nobody noticed it. And you know what we could do? I mean, actually, that did save money because some of the products went in were cheaper than beef.
Very interesting point there. You mentioned training, and Andy, perhaps if I can come through to you. One of the concerns, I think, throughout the public sector is that you're often dealing with kitchen teams who haven't necessarily got the training that a five-star restaurant chef might have. Is that a problem when it comes to preparing plant-based meals? And what might be the answer?
I think for me, we have to invest in our people. It's that investment now back into the chefs, because cooking evolves. Nick's just gave a great example there of taking 20-25% out and reformulating the recipe. And I think chefs need to we need to work, as you know, we work very closely with the likes of Pace. And I think for me, we also need to look at these the apprenticeships that the government are pushing at the moment. You know, these apprenticeships are not just for 16 to 18-year-olds. These are for anybody, and I think we need to start looking at those. I saw a comment pop up from one of the training groups saying they've got those trainings. So we need to get the training industry, to work with us closely, so we can actually identify what training's there, identify what our staff need to be trained on, so we have that needs analysis, and then work with them and invest in our teams. Because if we've got teams that are engaged, one of the comments was made earlier is, how do we get people to eat better and look at plant-based food? That, or I've always said, comes from working together, but also comes from the chef. If he's knowledgeable, he knows about it, he's got the passion inside him, and the great work Nick's doing has absolutely started to inspire chefs who haven't been able to be inspired for a long time because there's been no investment in them to train. So I think let's look at the apprenticeship levies, let's look at driving forward. But I think we have to acknowledge, David, there's been a shortfall, and we need to work with the likes with Molly and the Pace team there. And let's look at our local colleges. Let's get engaged to them. A little bit like Rupy did with Kingsway. It's just making, it's keep knocking that door and making it happen, and we can make it happen. And I think, working with Love British Food, we have to work together. We may not always agree, but if we work together collaboratively, we get the best way forward. I mean, I've just sat here now and just picking up on one of the points we made. Maybe what we need to do is also give recipes to people to take home in the public sector as well. So they know what's in their food, but they can also go away and cook it when they're at home. And that's for any dish. This is about choice. We're never going to, plant-based week is not about removing everything from the menu and solely having a plant-based menu. This is about choice. This is about, somebody mentioned earlier, cultural change. This is a major cultural change that's happened and happening, and will continue to do that. So for me, going back to the original thing, yes, we need to invest more in our chefs, but I think that comes with working collaborative across the public sector with the likes of Pace, and let's drive that forward ourselves.
Okay, thank you for that. Rupy, perhaps I know you did talk about the culinary medicine experience where you were you've got the trainee doctors and the dietitians and others in a room. Just give us a little bit of an idea about how you made that training session work.
Yeah, so I think it's really good to have different voices in the room, even if they don't agree, actually. And that's why with culinary medicine, we've made it very clear that we're not pro-vegan, pro-Mediterranean diet, pro-paleo, whatever. We have those different conversations with various people, and we basically just present the evidence there and guide people towards a healthier eating habits, which can include reduction in sugar, reduction in a whole bunch of different saturated fats, et cetera, et cetera. getting those different cohorts in the room was fairly easy, actually, from my perspective. Everyone wants to have this conversation. Everyone understands the need to collaborate with one another. What's difficult is providing said package and then scaling that across different medical schools, because you're fighting different bureaucracy barriers. I mean, how on earth you get an addition to an already overpopulated curriculum? But not only that, it's not just lectures, it's getting the students into a physical kitchen, staffing said kitchen, having them create meals, catering for allergens, a whole bunch of nutritional issues, et cetera, and then, you know, doing the family meal afterwards. There's a whole bunch of different things that we need to do. The pandemic was also a bit of a blessing in disguise from that perspective, because we transitioned everything to online. So we got the students cooking at home using relative swaps. So that's how I believe we're going to be able to scale this education piece out and get more people talking about the subject, because a lot of people aren't talking about it. And like I said earlier, we sort of consume unconsciously. And I do like the ideas, I think, of reducing meat in different ways. So the example of the beef patty, using a high quality beef, halving it with mushrooms and other healthy fillers rather than just rusk or whatever. That could be an interesting way to reduce to reduce meat consumption overall, whilst also heightening people's awareness of the other choices where they can go largely plant-based.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got a question now, and perhaps if I can come back to you, Andy, on this, from Jeanette Orion, and she's saying that the Food for Life Served here has been auditing their members' food sourcing for a number of years, but obviously they've made some progress, but not necessarily lots. And she's looking for the government to take this on and legislate for all public sector departments. Is that first of all, is it practical? And secondly, do you think it's something that the PSC 100 group maybe should get behind?
Morning, Jeanette. As always, a great question. Absolutely. I think we have to get behind it, David. And I think, you know, the wider benefit to the wider public sector would benefit as well. So I think my answer to that is yes, we need to get behind it. We need to talk to Jeanette, understand a little bit more of what we need to do and where we need to get to, but absolutely support that 100%. I think we've got to do it.
Excellent, thank you. And we've got now a similar question in a way. NHS, are standards enough? Would national specification and protocols not be more appropriate? That's anonymous, but sorry, Andy, if I can, because it's related, can I just come back to you on that one?
Yeah, I think I'm well known and well versed in what people will know. What my answer to that is absolutely. We should have robust specifications that everybody has to follow. And it comes back to a question posed earlier about cook chill. And can I use plant-based in cook chill? Absolutely we can. But the only way we can do that is if we have a national specification that everybody procures to. We have national recipes. Whether I ever see that in my lifetime, I don't know, but I'm really hopeful. Phil Shelley's done a fantastic job with the food review in the NHS. And I think the wider public sector can take some learnings from that as well. So I think that one that will evolve. We are working, you know, what Nick Vadis has done and the team at NHS supply chain in the last 18 months has been absolutely remarkable. It's not just been a small change, it's been a sea change. And, you know, I have to say, 2 years ago, I was probably NHS supply chain's biggest nemesis, really, you know, but now I'm their biggest advocate because what they're doing is making a difference. So yes, absolutely. I think we do need national specification, but everybody knows where I stand on that.
Okay, thank you. Alexia, if I can come to you now. I mean, Plant-Based Week, I think the consensus is that it isn't, what it represents is not a fad, but it is a trend. That being the case, what are the opportunities for British growers to get involved and use this as an opportunity to develop their businesses with hospitals and schools in their area?
Well, David, I think what's really exciting has come out of all of these discussions is a recognition of the need to reprioritize menus and budgets around the ability to purchase quality meat. And the opportunity that that creates for British farmers is actually tremendous, because what I hope will come out of this is that chefs will be empowered with their budgets to buy better meat, which may well open up opportunities for them to form new supplier relationships with British farmers who can supply that quality grass-fed meat, which links in with the plant-based discussion I was making earlier. And I feel there's a real sense of urgency with this. I mean, we're all aware in the newspapers today the discussions about the Australia-New Zealand trade deal. You know, if it is signed along the way that the newspapers are suggesting, farmers have 15 years before the zero tariff comes in. Well, wouldn't it be great if the public sector could move more of that 2.6 billion food budget towards actually forming supply relationships with British farmers who do invest already in high quality meat production, and we can get more of that on those menus. And I think that is compatible with everything that has been discussed on this panel today, and that's what I would really love to see come out of this. I mean, the other thing, just to say while I'm on air, as it were, is it is so important that dietitians are involved in the crafting of these menus. And my understanding, I'm not being within the public sector, but my understanding from everyone I talk to is there just aren't enough dietitians or nutritionists, and at every level, whether it's working alongside chefs or whether it's at a senior management level or whether it's in terms of the writing of tenders, or, you know, it's really great that all of this debate is happening, and I can see good things coming from it from the point of nutrition, and I can see great opportunities for British farmers, but it all needs to be handled intelligently.
Simon, just to pick up on Alexia's point there, I mean, she seems to be sort of talking about some sort of national food strategy, which is what we hope is going to be coming out before too long. What should any national food strategy do in terms of encouraging public sector catering to obviously follow up on the trend of plant-based foods, but more widely to look to source more local, higher welfare product and sort of local quality fruit and veg?
Wow, David, the answer we've all been waiting for from Henry Dimbleby's strategy. That's what, 18 months in the making. So, you know, latest we'll hear possibly in July, and hopefully that question will be answered. I think there's no silver bullet to this issue, and I think Alexis has really sort of, you know, we've created a roadmap in a sense of what needs to happen to get us to this sort of better by half situation, and that puts a lot of emphasis on food service. That's the sort of place that we're talking about today, but there's obviously the private sector. Retailers, we haven't talked about some of our big retailers and what they're doing on less and better today, and government. I think really government needs to, what I'd like to see certainly, you know, coming out on the food strategy is an acceptance that we do need to reset and reorientate the food system away from a sort of productivity narrative to delivering health, sustainability, nature benefits, and then what sort of, you know, what can government do to support that? And there is government and business fundamentally shapes the way we eat. We're not suggesting, and I don't think we've heard this on this panel, having a conversation with anyone around how they should eat, what they should eat. We're about creating the right enabling conditions. Alexis touched on the trade standard is absolutely fundamental. There's no point telling people to eat, you know, encouraging people to eat differently and then just importing cheap meat from Australia, America, wherever, undermining our own great farmers and their standards. So I think we need a really integrated plan. I think building on what Rupy was saying earlier, we need government to take food really seriously, food and farming really seriously. It needs to be at the heart of government. And I think if anything comes out of the discussions, you know, if we come back together in a year's time, I'd love to see that food is really elevated and we get a governance system that really tries to sort out some of these issues. We've got 12 departments that are interested in food. It's an absolute mess, and no single leadership from any government department really on these issues. You know, Michael Gove was really one of the first to really embrace food and take it very centrally in government. He's not there and in place now. I think we need that again. And we need, you know, and then they need to be coming to Andy and saying, well, this is our direction of travel. What can I do to help you? And to Nick, what can I do to help? Because you guys have the answers. So, you know, I think government needs to, you know, become very central part of this role. I don't see that happening at the moment. But I hope the food strategy and the government buying standards, and if we come back in a year's time, we'll have something more to say.
Right, thank you very much. Yes, we'll look forward to see what happens in July. Rupy, if I can send this one your way, again anonymous, so we don't know who's behind it, but how do you propose to encourage patients in hospitals to choose vegetarian or vegan main course options when the majority don't even choose to have vegetables with their meal? Sounds like someone who's on the front line and seen an awful lot of vegetables returning uneaten.
Yeah. Well, I spend most of my time in A&E these days, so I don't see too many inpatient plates, and also because they're meal protected times as well, so I shouldn't be seeing too many patients when they're eating their lunches. But from my knowledge of the quality of food and the general sort of feedback is that patients in their vulnerable states can be quite sensitive to the types of food that are served to them as well. So comfort food is definitely something that they tend to opt for, which can explain why their eating habits aren't the best. I think it also comes down to something that Alexia mentioned earlier and someone in the comments as well about getting dietitians and nutritionists at the forefront of this conversation. There are only about 5,000 dietitians across the UK. So, you know, even if I, as a general practitioner, wanted to refer into them, I don't have the necessary means for that. So that really should be a core part of the strategy within the NHS to upskill as many professionals in nutrition as possible. So we actually have that signposting and they can work in those clinical environments and not just an ITU, because dietitians that work in hospitals are generally dealing with the most severely ill of patients who are malnourished, or they have dysphagia, or they ITUs. They do a lot of TPN or total parenteral nutrition, which isn't the type of nutrition that we're talking about when patients actually have the capacity to choose what they want on their lunch menu. So that's kind of where we need to focus a lot of our attention on, I feel, because it speaks to the cultural change that needs to happen of normalizing a plant-forward way of eating. Yeah, that would be my suggestion in that sense.
Okay, thank you for that. Nick, another issue that seems to be really at the heart of everything. People have been talking about education. Now, in schools, you obviously have an opportunity to as well as feed children, to teach them about food. Is it an opportunity that we're taking, and should there really be a bit more emphasis on getting children hands-on cooking as well to help that education process?
Well, our Chartwell's business does all those kind of activities across the year. So they have chefs that go into schools and talk about, you know, food and diet, not in a heavy sense, but in a kind of fun sense to get kids engaged. And also, you know, we run the school fruit and veg scheme as well. So we distribute all the fruit and veg to schools, and we're looking at different products all the time that we can introduce to kids in as part of their diet as well, free fruit and veg scheme. But, you know, the education side of things has been going on with our chefs, with schools, and still going on now. It's not something new, and it's something we've been doing all the time. So to me, that's not new news.
No, okay, thank you. Andy, there's been a fair amount of consensus that in many ways that the food that we produce is sold cheap. In other words, we're not paying the sort of the full value for the better quality that we're demanding, the higher welfare and all of those sorts of aspects. And yet, if you were to increase costs and give, you know, farmers and growers at a fair price, the public sector isn't funded to be able to maintain that. There's a bit of a sort of a disconnect there, isn't there?
There certainly is, and I think this is where the PSC 100 and all the associations can really get together, and we've got to make sure we're heard by government that we do need more funding. This isn't about wasting public funds. This is about investing in the health and well-being of the nation. And I think we have to make that point clear. And I did pick up on Simon's point now, and I actually wrote down Ministry of Food. That is probably what we need. We need a Ministry of Food, not just thing, but focusing on food. Food is the substantial thing of life. And I think, you know, picking up what Simon said there, maybe that's something that we have to do as an organisation and as a group, right, to the government. Alexia is spot on. We do need to involve more dietitians and nutritionists. I've said this for years. They are core to helping us deliver what we're going to do. We can't, none of us can do this journey on our own. We have to do it collaboratively. I keep coming back to that. And nobody can be more proud of David than myself. And just I'm going on slightly, but we sat down in 2019 and we discussed about the campaign. We listened to the Alexia's point. We changed it to 20% less but better, and that worked. The campaign's now literally come to an end because we fulfilled what we wanted to do. The report says that. We've now got Plant-Based Week, but that's the start. We need to start to keep this journey going. You know, our sponsors, I can't thank them enough. The suppliers have been so innovational. We need this message to keep going. Simon says, what will it be like in a year's time? We have to keep this year going. We have to keep the message. We have to keep talking to each other and the collaboration, David. And I think that will then get government, coming back to your original question, that gets government to hear us and say, we do need this. However, we need the likes of what Nick did, example with the food. Do we actually need a great deal of money, or is it just re-engineering the menus that we're using? And I think the other one I will just throw out at the end is we need Public Health England, or the new body what's coming. We need that 5 a day or 7 a day message to be re-looked at, because it's now become a little bit more of a just ticking a box, and that's not what it's about. So we need to, again, to lobby them to do that. And I'm looking forward to the food strategy report coming out. I'm not even going to go into food standards. That's a totally different webinar. But we do need the government to realise British farmers produce the best meat, and whatever deal they strike, it has to be on the British standards, not on any other standards.
Okay, thank you. I don't know about 5 or 7 a day. According to Rupy, it should be closer to 10 a day, but that might be a step too far to immediately anyway. We're coming to the point now where we're going to have to start sort of wrapping things up. So I wanted to go around everyone and just get a sort of a final thought. And Simon, if you don't mind, may I start with you?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for a great discussion, and yeah, a really great array of perspectives. The one thing, I mean, I'd like to come back in a year's time and I'd like to see some changes. And I think this agenda is moving quite quickly. We're all working on it. So yeah, I take the invitation to come back in a year's time. I would just take up the point that from our perspective as Eating Better, that we have a great engagement with dietitians. We work very closely with the BDA. They have some fantastic resources around sustainable diets, which I'll encourage everybody to read, and they're reading a lot. So I do think dietitians are absolutely critical, and I do think they're there at the table. Maybe not enough, but it's coming and it's growing. So yeah, looking forward to working with everyone and seeing if this discussion moves across government.
Okay, well, we hope very much that we'll be here some similar time next year to do something similar. Alexia, thank you very much for joining us today with your views. Do you want an opportunity now, just to sort of a little sort of final thought?
Well, just the passion in the public sector to get this right is inspirational, and I just look forward to seeing that passion translated into more opportunities for British farmers to supply the public sector. I mean, that's really what I hope. And every time I have any conversations with any of the leaders in the public sector through your groups, David and Andy, I come away very confident that and as Simon has said, I think a lot is going to happen in this next year. And there are intelligent people involved and lots of opportunities out there. And we've all got the same goals, good for the nation's health, good for British farmers, good for the environment. The whole thing all fits together if we get it right.
Okay, thank you very much. Nick, perhaps I can come to you. Any sort of final thoughts on what you've heard today?
Yeah, I think, I'm a great view. We need to look after British farmers. They do a great job. We need to buy more British produce. And I think education as well on plant-based and menus and recipe development is absolutely key. Educating the chefs, educating the people that are going to serve the food, and that could be a ward nurse on what they're delivering to patients, and perhaps they could talk to that patient who's being awkward, who doesn't like plant-based, to try it. If you educate somebody, they can kind of sell the product. I think we need less processed plant-based foods. We need to move towards that. And and we need to educate the CEO of Hospital Trust that food is a really important part of any recovery process and everywhere.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Andy.
Thanks, David. Thank you, everybody. It's been a really fantastic panel discussion, and thank you to my fellow panelists. But also thank you for Public Sector Cater for putting these events on and working with us, because your inspiration is inspiring everybody else to do really well. And also thank you for the suppliers for their great work and their innovation. But for me, I think we have to keep this journey going. We have to keep the debate going. We have to get government to listen and work more. And we've made strides to that. We're now, we're engaging with Deaf for More. But I think for me, we've done so well. But this is about the wider public sector, from universities, prisons, MOD, care homes, hospitals, schools. We have made such a great strides from where we had at that PSMI luncheon. And I think we need to keep that talk going. We need to work together, involve everybody in the process. And I look forward to being here in a year's time and saying we're making a difference. This starts cooking in school. I was having a chat with somebody last night over social media. We need to get our children, when they're in school, to learn to cook, to fall back in love with food. If they fall back in love with food, we start the journey. This is about working together. For me in the NHS, it's about that last 9 yards, the power of 3, but it's about that in every sector within the public sector. It's not about Cater being on his own. This is about working together. So David, thank you for the great opportunity. Thanks for the debate. I think it's been fantastic, but let's not stop there. Let's move forward.
Definitely, yeah. We're not going to leave it there. Rupy, if I can offer you the chance for sort of the final word.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, first of all, thank you. It's been a fascinating discussion. And I love having so many different voices in the virtual room. I think plant-based eating is certainly here to stay. I think we need to appreciate that food can be used as a tool for health as well as harm. So we need to be mindful of the rise of eating disorders, people's unique requirements, as well as catering for choice as well. I think it's very, very important. I think that's reflected in everyone's comments today. We also need to make sure that we don't exclude as well. We probably haven't had a chance to talk about food insecurity in as much depth as it needs, but I think that's another webinar in itself. And, just thinking of that 16-year-old male or female today, they're going to be impacted by the decisions that we make in this present moment by the time that they're our age. So that will be in the context of the environment, in the context of the next pandemics, which will be antimicrobial resistance. And mark my words, we will be experiencing that in our lifetimes. Water scarcity, as well as what things we can achieve with a genuine and compassionate promise to ourselves to reduce meat consumption, prioritizing whole food, plant-based eating that is mindful of all the things that I mentioned earlier. So I think if we can agree on that and make strides toward that as a positive future, I think we can crack the problems that present themselves to us today.
That's great. Thank you very much. I'm afraid that has to be it for today. My thanks once again to Dr. Rupy, to Simon, Alexia, Nick and Andy, and to you too for joining us today. There'll be a full link to the recording of this webinar available on the Public Sector Catering website. I'm told that we'll be drawing the 5 winners of the Dr. Rupy's signed books at the end of this week. And on the slides coming up, you'll be able to see what's happening during the rest of Plant-Based Week, including our next cooking demo this afternoon at 2:30 with the Platinum sponsor Garden Gourmet. The next 3 screens coming up, you'll be able to see how you can visit our website, the new dates for Plant-Based Week 2022, and the schedule of demos. Thank you again for joining us, and see you later.